On the 9th of March 2026, the BBC broke a streak it had kept unbroken since 1989 and replaced the King's most important annual ceremony with an episode about a Canadian couple house hunting in Scotland. The Commonwealth Day service has run at Westminster Abbey every March since 1972, marking the one day each year when the 56 member nations of the Commonwealth, representing roughly 2.7 billion people, are formally honored together in a single multi-faith ceremony. No other fixture on the royal calendar performs quite the same function, gathering representatives from nations spanning 6 continents into a single hour inside one building. The BBC had broadcast it live every year since 1989, with a single exception in 2021 during pandemic restrictions. That single exception came with an obvious, universally understood cause: a national lockdown that had cancelled nearly every large gathering in the country at the same time, leaving no ambiguity about why the broadcast had lapsed that year specifically. That streak made it one of the corporation's longest-running unbroken royal commitments, older than most of the presenters who eventually covered it. The 2024 broadcast, presented by Rita Chakrabarty, followed the same format the corporation had used for decades: live coverage from inside the Abbey itself, cutting between the congregation, the choir, and readings delivered by representatives from across the Commonwealth's member nations. The 2026 edition of the ceremony had a specific political backdrop that made the broadcasting decision sting more than a routine scheduling change might have. This year's service carried more weight than usual before it even began. King Charles and Queen Camilla led the congregation, joined by the Prince and Princess of Wales, Princess Anne, and the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester. It marked the largest joint public appearance by senior royals since Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor had been arrested and then released the previous month over his alleged ties to Jeffrey Epstein. His arrest and release had already dominated headlines for weeks by the time the service arrived, drawing intense scrutiny to every subsequent public appearance the family made together. For a family working to project unity after that story, the timing of the ceremony mattered. Every senior working royal in one place, on camera, delivering a message about unity and shared purpose, was exactly the kind of image the palace would ordinarily want broadcast as widely as possible. None of that reached BBC One's usual afternoon audience. Instead of the service, viewers got an episode of Escape to the Country, following a Canadian couple touring properties in Scotland's central lowlands. None of what replaced the ceremony was chosen to send any particular message. The program itself was nothing unusual. It had aired continuously since 2002, built around the same gentle format of prospective buyers touring 3 or 4 properties before choosing a favorite, and it typically drew a loyal, modest daytime audience with no connection whatsoever to royal or Commonwealth affairs. A BBC spokesperson explained the decision in a single sentence to the press. The choice not to broadcast the ceremony the way it had in previous years reflected the difficult decisions the corporation faced amid its funding challenges. The statement added that BBC News would still cover the event across its platforms, including bulletins and the rolling news channel. In practice, that meant a segment inside a wider news broadcast, rather than the dedicated hour the ceremony had previously received. A difference in scale that royal commentators were quick to point out, even as the BBC insisted coverage would continue in some form. A bulletin item lasting a minute or two carries a fundamentally different weight than an hour of uninterrupted footage from inside Westminster Abbey, even when both technically satisfy a claim of having covered the event. Royal author and Majesty magazine editor Ingrid Seward didn't accept the explanation quietly. Seward had covered the royal family in print for decades by that point, giving her criticism more weight in royal circles than a passing social media complaint would carry on its own. Her position at Majesty magazine, a publication that first appeared on newsstands in May 1980 and has tracked the institution's public image ever since, gave the remark a professional context that made it harder for the BBC to dismiss as an overreaction from an outside critic. She called the decision ridiculous and appalling, pointing out that the BBC had covered the ceremony for years and that it remained the most important date on the calendar for celebrating the Commonwealth. Viewers reacted along similar lines on social media, with one comment calling the corporation completely irrelevant. The criticism came from ordinary viewers as much as royal specialists, a detail that made the story harder for the BBC to frame as a niche complaint from a small circle of dedicated royal watchers. Complaints landed on the corporation's own social media accounts within hours of the schedule change becoming public. The explanation grew harder to defend 2 weeks later. On the 25th of March, the BBC broadcast the installation of Sarah Mullally as the 106th Archbishop of Canterbury in full, with Prince William and Catherine in attendance. Asked directly why one royal-adjacent event made air and the other didn't, a BBC spokeswoman described the Archbishop's installation as a historic event the corporation was pleased to broadcast to audiences across the UK. Before repeating the same line about funding challenges to explain the Commonwealth Day decision, the corporation had, in fact, broadcast the previous Archbishop's installation back in 2013, giving it a clear precedent to point to. No comparable precedent existed for skipping Commonwealth Day. The comparison did not go unnoticed by the same commentators already criticizing the decision. That 2013 broadcast covered Justin Welby's installation as the 105th Archbishop, meaning the BBC had, within the space of 2 decades, aired the ceremony marking a new head of the Church of England twice, while dropping live coverage of a Commonwealth service it had never previously missed outside a global pandemic. None of the broadcasting decisions changed what actually happened inside Westminster Abbey. King Charles delivered his address that day regardless of who was watching on television. As head of the Commonwealth, he described the organization as a force for good, grounded in community and committed to a kind of restorative sustainability with a genuine return on investment, enriched by culture and steadfast in its care for the planet. It was the kind of language a head of state uses when addressing an audience assumed to be paying close attention. Delivered on a day when the actual audience for that specific message had been narrowed considerably by a scheduling decision made weeks in advance. The words reached the Abbey, the news bulletins that picked them up afterward, and whoever happened to catch the coverage online. They did not reach whoever was watching BBC One that particular Monday afternoon, since that slot belonged to a couple from Canada deciding between a cottage and a farmhouse in the Scottish countryside. 2.7 billion people, in theory, had a stake in what was said that day. On BBC One, for the first time in 37 years, none of them were watching.